Text 44. The science of logical argument, the Vedic goals of life, and also law and order, moral codes, and the celebrated hymns Bhu, Bhuva, and Sva all became manifested from the mouths of Brahma, and the pranava Omkara was manifested from his heart. Text 45. Thereafter, the art of literary expression, usnik, was generated from the hairs on the body of the Almighty Prajapati. The principal Vedic hymn, Gayatri, was generated from the skin, Tristup from the flesh, Anustup from the veins, and Jagati from the bones of the Lord of the living entities. Text 46. The art of writing verse, Pankti, became manifested from the bone marrow, and that of Brahati, another type of verse, was generated from the life breath of the Lord of the living entities. Text 47. Brahma's soul was manifested as the touch alphabets, his body as the vowels, his senses as the sibilant alphabets, his strength as the intermediate alphabets, and his sensual activities as the 7 notes of music. In Sanskrita, there are 13 vowels and 35 consonants. The vowels are A, E, I, U, R, La, E, I, O, Au. And the consonants are Ka, Kha, Ga, Ga, etc. Amongst the consonants, the first 25 letters are called the sparsas. There are also 4 antashtas. Of the usmas, there are 3 S's called talava, murdanya, and dantya. The musical notes are sa, ra, ga, ma, pa, da, and ni. All these sound vibrations are originally called sabha Brahma, or spiritual sound. It is said, therefore, that Brahma was created in the Mahakalpa as the incarnation of spiritual sound. The Vedas are spiritual sound, and therefore there is no need of material interpretation for the sound vibration of the Vedic literature. The Vedas should be vibrated as they are, although they are symbolically represented with letters which are known to us materially. In the ultimate issue, there is nothing material, because everything has its origin in the spiritual world. The material manifestation is therefore called illusion in the proper sense of the term. For those who are realized souls, there is nothing but spirit. Text 48. Brahma is the personal representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the source of transcendental sound, and is therefore above the conception of manifested and unmanifested. Brahma is the complete form of the Absolute Truth, and is invested with multifarious energies. Purport. The post of Brahma is the highest responsible post within the universe, and it is offered to the most perfect personality of the universe. Sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead has to become Brahma when there is no suitable living being to occupy the post. In the material world, Brahma is the complete representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and transcendental sound, pranava, comes from him. He is therefore invested with multifarious energies, from which all the demigods, like Indra, Chandra, and Varuna, are manifested. His transcendental value is not to be minimized, even though he exhibited a tendency to enjoy his own daughter. There is a purpose for the exhibition of such a tendency by Brahma, and he is not to be condemned like an ordinary living entity. Text 49. Thereafter Brahma accepted another body, in which sex life was not forbidden, and thus he engaged himself in the matter of further creation. Purport. In his former body, which was transcendental, affection for sex life was forbidden, and Brahma therefore had to accept another body to allow himself to be connected with sex. He thus engaged himself in the matter of creation. His former body transformed into fog, as previously described. Text 50. O son of Kurus, when Brahma saw that in spite of the presence of sages of great potency, there was no sufficient increase in population, he seriously began to consider how the population could be increased. Text 51. Brahma thought to himself, Alas, it is wonderful that in spite of my being scattered all over, there is still insufficient population throughout the universe. There is no other cause for this misfortune but destiny. Text 52. While he was thus absorbed in contemplation and was observing the supernatural power, 2 other forms were generated from his body. They are still celebrated as the body of Brahma. Purport. 2 bodies came out from the body of Brahma. One had a mustache, and the other had swollen breasts. No one can explain the source of their manifestation, and therefore until today they are known as the Kayam, or the body of Brahma, with no indication of their relationship as his son or daughter. Text 53. The 2 newly separated bodies united together in a sexual relationship. Text 54. Out of them, the one who had the male form became known as the Manu, named Svayambhava, and the woman became known as Satarupa, the queen of the great soul Manu. Text 55. Thereafter, by sex indulgence, they gradually increased generations of population one after another. Text 56. O son of Bharata, in due course of time he, Manu, begot in Satarupa 5 children, 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Text 57. The father, Manu, handed over his first daughter, Akuti, to the sage Ruchi, the middle daughter, Devahuti, to the sage Kardama, and the youngest, Parsuti, to Daksha. From them all the world filled with population. Purport. The history of the creation of the population of the universe is given herewith. Brahma is the original living creature in the universe, from whom were generated the Manu Svayambhava and his wife Satarupa. From Manu 2 sons and 3 daughters were born, and from them all the population in different planets has sprung up until now. Therefore Brahma is known as the grandfather of everyone, and the personality of Godhead, being the father of Brahma, is known as the great-grandfather of all living beings. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita as follows: You are the Lord of Air, the Supreme Justice, Yama, the Fire, and the Lord of Rains. You are the Moon, and you are the Great-Grandfather. Therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto you again and again. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 3rd Canto, 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Creation of the Kumaras and Others. Chapter 13. The Appearance of Lord Varaha. Text 1. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, after hearing all these most virtuous topics from the sage Maitreya, Vidura inquired further on the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which he adored to hear. Purport. The word Adrita is significant because it indicates that Vidura had a natural inclination for hearing the transcendental message of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he was never fully satisfied, though continuing to hear those topics. He wanted to hear more and more so that he could be more and more blessed by the transcendental message. Text 2. Vidura said, O great sage, what did Svayambhava, the dear son of Brahma, do after obtaining his very loving wife? Text 3. O best of the virtuous, the original king of kings, Manu, was a great devotee of the personality of Godhead, Hari, and thus it is worth hearing of his sublime character and activities. Please describe them. I am very eager to hear. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees. In the absolute world, there is no difference in quality between the Supreme Lord and his pure devotee. Therefore, hearing the topics of the Lord and hearing of the character and activities of the pure devotee have the same result, namely the development of devotional service. Text 4. Persons who hear from a spiritual master with great labor and for a long time must hear from the mouths of pure devotees about the character and activities of pure devotees. Pure devotees always think within their hearts of the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, who awards his devotees liberation. Purport. Transcendental students are those who undergo great penance in being trained by hearing the Vedas from a bona fide spiritual master. Not only must they hear about the activities of the Lord, but they must also hear about the transcendental qualities of the devotees who are constantly thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord within their hearts. A pure devotee of the Lord cannot be separated from the lotus feet of the Lord for even a moment. Undoubtedly, the Lord is always within the hearts of all living creatures, but they hardly know about it because they are deluded by the illusory material energy. The devotees, however, realize the presence of the Lord, and therefore they can always see the lotus feet of the Lord within their hearts. Such pure devotees of the Lord are as glorious as the Lord. They are in fact recommended by the Lord as more worshipable than he himself. Worship of the devotee is more potent than worship of the Lord. It is therefore the duty of the transcendental students to hear of pure devotees, as explained by similar devotees of the Lord, because one cannot explain about the Lord or his devotee unless one happens to be a pure devotee himself. Text 5. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, "The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, was pleased to place his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura because Vidura was very meek and gentle. The sage Maitreya was very pleased with Vidura's word, and being influenced by his spirit, he attempted to speak." Purport. The word Sahasrasirsna is very significant. One who has diverse energies and activities and a wonderful brain is known as the Sahasrasirsna. This qualification is applicable only to the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and no one else. The personality of Godhead was pleased to dine sometimes with Vidura at his home, and while resting he placed his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura. Maitreya was inspired by the thought of Vidura's wonderful fortune. The hairs of his body stood on end, and he was pleased to narrate the topics of the personality of Godhead with great delight. Text 5. The sage Maitreya said to Vidura, after his appearance, "Manu, the father of mankind, along with his wife, thus addressed the reservoir of Vedic wisdom, Brahma, with obeisances and folded hands." Text 7. You are the father of all living entities and the source of their subsistence, because they are all born of you. Please order us how we may be able to render service unto you. Purport. A son's duty is not only to make the father the source of supply for all his needs, but also, when he is grown up, to render service unto him. That is the law of creation beginning from the time of Brahma. A father's duty is to bring up the son until he is grown, and when the son is grown up, it is his duty to render service unto the father. Text 8. O worshipful one, please give us your direction for the execution of duty within our working capacity, so that we can follow it for fame in this life, and progress in the next. Purport. Brahma is the direct recipient of Vedic knowledge from the personality of Godhead, and anyone discharging his entrusted duties in disciplic succession from Brahma is sure to gain fame in this life and salvation in the next. The disciplic succession from Brahma is called the Brahma Sampradaya, and it descends as follows: Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhva Muni, Purnaprajna, Padmanabha, Nirhari, Madhava, Aksobhya, Jayatirtha, Jnanasiddhu, Dayanidhi, Vidyanidhi, Rajendra, Jayadharma, Purushottama, Brahmayatirtha, Vyasatirtha, Lakshmipati, Madhavendra, Puri, Ishvarapuri, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Svarupa Damodara, and Sri Rupa Goswami and others, Sri Raghunatha Dasa Goswami, Krishna Dasa Goswami, Narottama Dasa Thakura, Vishwanatha Chakravarti, Jagannatha Dasa Babaji, Bhaktivedanta Thakura, Gaurakishora Dasa Babaji, Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. This line of disciplic succession from Brahma is spiritual, whereas the genealogical succession from Manu is material, but both are on the progressive march towards the same goal of Krishna consciousness. Text 9. Lord Brahma said, "My dear son, O Lord of the world, I am very pleased with you, and I desire all blessings for both you and your wife. You have without reservation surrendered yourself unto me with your heart for my instructions." Purport. The relationship between the father and the son is always sublime. The father is naturally disposed with goodwill towards the son, and he is always ready to help the son in his progress in life. But in spite of the father's goodwill, the son is sometimes misguided because of his misuse of personal independence. Every living entity, however small or big he may be, has the choice of independence. If the son is unreservedly willing to be guided by the father is 10 times more eager to instruct and guide him by all means. The father and son relationship, as exhibited here in the dealings of Brahma and Manu, is excellent. Both the father and the son are well qualified, and their example should be followed by all humankind. Manu, the son, unreservedly asked the father, Brahma, to instruct him, and the father, who was full of Vedic wisdom, was very glad to instruct. The example of the father of mankind may be rigidly followed by mankind, and that will advance the cause of the relationship of fathers and sons. Text 10. O hero, your example is quite befitting a son in relationship with his father. This sort of adoration for the superior is required. One who is beyond the limit of envy and who is sane accepts the order of his father with great delight and executes it to his full capacity. Purport. When the four previous sons of Brahma, the sages Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanatkumara, refused to obey their father, Brahma was mortified, and his anger was manifested in the shape of Rudra. That incident was not forgotten by Brahma, and therefore the obedience of Manu Svayambhava was very encouraging. From the material point of view, the four sages' disobedience to the order of their father was certainly abominable, but because such obedience was for a higher purpose, they were free from the reaction of disobedience. Those who disobey their fathers on material grounds, however, are surely subjected to disciplinary reaction for such disobedience. Manu's obedience to his father on material grounds was certainly free from envy, and in the material world it is imperative for ordinary men to follow the example of Manu. Text 11. Since you are my very obedient son, I ask you to beget children qualified like yourself in the womb of your wife. Rule the world in pursuance of the principles of devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus worship the Lord by performance of yajna. Purport. The purpose of the material creation by Brahma is clearly described herein. Every human being should beget nice children in the womb of his wife as a sacrifice for the purpose of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service. In the Vishnu Purana it is stated, one can worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu by proper discharge of the principles of Varna and Ashrama. There is no alternative to pacifying the Lord by execution of the principles of the Varnashrama system. Vishnu worship is the ultimate aim of human life. Those who take the license of married life for sense enjoyment must also take the responsibility to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, and the first stepping stone is the Varnashrama Dharma system. Varnashrama Dharma is the systematic institution for advancing in worship of Vishnu. However, if one directly engages in the process of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it may not be necessary to undergo the disciplinary system of Varnashrama Dharma. The other sons of Brahma, the Kumaras, directly engaged in devotional service, and thus they had no need to execute the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. Text 12. O king, if you can give proper protection to the living beings in the material world, that will be the best service for me. When the Supreme Lord sees you to be a good protector of the conditioned souls, certainly the master of the senses will be very pleased with you. Purport. The whole administrative system is arranged for the purpose of going back home, back to Godhead. Brahma is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Manu is the representative of Brahma. Similarly, all other kings on different planets of the universe are representatives of Manu. The law book for the entire human society is the Manu Samhita, which directs all activities towards the transcendental service of the Lord. Every king, therefore, must know that his responsibility in administration is not merely to exact taxes from the citizens, but to see personally that the citizens under him are being trained in Vishnu worship. Everyone must be educated in Vishnu worship and engaged in the devotional service of Hrishikesha, the owner of the senses. The conditioned souls are meant not to satisfy their material senses, but to satisfy the senses of Hrishikesha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the purpose of the complete administrative system. One who knows this secret, as disclosed here in the version of Brahma, is the perfect administrative head. One who does not know this is a show-bottle administrator. By training the citizens in the devotional service of the Lord, the head of a state can be free in his responsibility. Otherwise, he will fail in the onerous duty entrusted to him, and thus be punishable by the supreme authority. There is no other alternative in the discharge of administrative duty. Text 13. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Janardana, Lord Krishna, is the form to accept all the results of sacrifice. If he is not satisfied, then one's labor for advancement is futile. He is the ultimate self, and therefore one who does not satisfy him certainly neglects his own interests. Purport. Brahma is deputed as the supreme head of universal affairs, and he in his turn deputes Manu and orders as charge d'affaires of the material manifestation. But the whole show is for the manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma knows how to satisfy the Lord, and similarly, persons engaged in the life of Brahma's plan of activities also know how to satisfy the Lord. The Lord is satisfied by the process of devotional service, consisting of the ninefold process of hearing, chanting, etc. It is in one's own self-interest to execute prescribed devotional service, and anyone who neglects this process neglects his own self-interest. Everyone wants to satisfy his senses, but above the senses is the mind. Above the mind is the intelligence. Above the intelligence is the individual self, and above the individual self is the super-self. Above even the super-self is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu Tattva. The primeval Lord and the cause of all causes is Sri Krishna. The complete process of perfectional service is to render service for the satisfaction of the transcendental senses of Lord Krishna, who is known as Janardana. Text 14. Sri Manu said, O all-powerful Lord, O killer of all sins, I shall abide by your order. Now please let me know my place and that of the living entities born of me. Text 15. O Master of the demigods, please attempt to lift the earth, which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all the living entities. It can be done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord. Purport. The great water mentioned in this connection is the Garbhodaka ocean, which fills half of the universe. Text 16. Sri Maitreya said, Thus, seeing the earth merged in the water, Brahma gave his attention for a long time to how it could be lifted. Purport. According to Jiva Goswami, the topics delineated here are of different millenniums. The present topics are of the Svetavaraha millennium, and topics regarding the Chakshusha millennium will also be discussed in this chapter. Text 17. Brahma thought, while I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. Purport. The devotees of the Lord, who are all confidential servitors, are sometimes perplexed in the discharge of their respective duties, but they are never discouraged. They have full faith in the Lord, and He paves the way for the smooth progress of the devotee's duty. Text 18. O sinless Vidura, all of a sudden, while Brahma was engaged in thinking, a small form of a boar came out of his nostril. The measurement of the creature was not more than the upper portion of a thumb. Text 19. O descendant of Bharata, while Brahma was observing him, that boar became situated in the sky in a wonderful manifestation, as gigantic as a great elephant. Text 20. Struck with wonder at observing the wonderful boar-like form in the sky, Brahma, with great Brahmanas like Marichi, as well as the Kumaras and Manu, began to argue in various ways. Text 21. Is this some extraordinary entity come in the pretense of a boar? It is very wonderful that he has come from my nose. Text 22. First of all, this boar was seen no bigger than the tip of a thumb, and within a moment he was as large as a stone. My mind is perturbed. Is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu? Purport. Since Brahma is the supermost person in the universe, and he had never before experienced such a form, he could guess that the wonderful appearance of the boar was an incarnation of Vishnu. The uncommon features symptomatic of the incarnation of Godhead can bewilder even the mind of Brahma. Text 23. While Brahma was deliberating with his sons, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu roared tumultuously like a great mountain. Purport. It appears that great hills and mountains also have their roaring power because they are also living entities. The volume of the sound vibrated is in proportion to the size of the material body. While Brahma was guessing about the appearance of the Lord's incarnation as a boar, the Lord confirmed Brahma's contemplation by roaring with his gorgeous voice. Text 24. The omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead enlivened Brahma and the other highly elevated Brahmanas by again roaring with his uncommon voice, which echoed in all directions. Purport. Brahma and other enlightened Brahmanas who know the Supreme Personality of Godhead are enlivened by the appearance of the Lord in any of his multi-incarnations. The appearance of the wonderful and gigantic incarnation of Vishnu as the mountain-like boar did not fill them with any kind of fear, although the Lord's resounding voice was tumultuous and echoed horribly in all directions as an open threat to all demons who might challenge his omnipotency. Text 25. When the great sages and thinkers who are residents of Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka heard the tumultuous voice of Lord Boar, which was the all-auspicious sound of the all-merciful Lord, they chanted auspicious chants from the three Vedas. Purport. The word Maya is very significant in this verse. Maya means mercy, specific knowledge, and also illusion. Therefore, Lord Boar is everything. He is merciful, he is all knowledge, and he is illusion also. The sound which he vibrated as the boar incarnation was answered by the Vedic hymns of the great sages in the planets Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Satyaloka. The highest intellectual and pious living entities live in those planets, and when they heard the extraordinary voice of the boar, they could understand that the specific sound was vibrated by the Lord and no one else. Therefore they replied by praying to the Lord with Vedic hymns. The earth planet was submerged in the mire, but on hearing the sound of the Lord, the inhabitants of the higher planets were all jubilant, because they knew that the Lord was there to deliver the earth. Therefore Brahma and all the sages, such as Bhrigu, Brahma's other sons, and learned Brahmanas, were enlivened, and they concertedly joined in praising the Lord with the transcendental vibrations of the Vedic hymns. The most important is the Brihadaranyaka Purana verse, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Text 26. Playing like an elephant, he entered into the water after roaring again, in reply to the Vedic prayers by the great devotees. The Lord is the object of the Vedic prayers, and thus he understood that the devotees' prayers were meant for him. Purport. The form of the Lord in any shape is always transcendental and full of knowledge and mercy. The Lord is the destroyer of all material contamination, because his form is personified Vedic knowledge. All the Vedas worship the transcendental form of the Lord. In the Vedic mantras, the devotees request the Lord to remove the glaring effulgence because it covers his real face. That is the version of the Upanishad. The Lord has no material form, but his form is always understood in terms of the Vedas. The Vedas are said to be the breath of the Lord, and that breath was inhaled by Brahma, the original student of the Vedas. The breathing from the nostril of Brahma caused the appearance of Lord Boar, and therefore the boar incarnation of the Lord is the personified Vedas. The glorification of the incarnation by the sages on the higher planets consisted of factual Vedic hymns. Whenever there is glorification of the Lord, it is to be understood that Vedic mantras are being rightly vibrated. The Lord was therefore pleased when such Vedic mantras were chanted, and to encourage his pure devotees, he roared once more and entered the water to rescue the submerged earth. Text 27. Before entering the water to rescue the earth, Lord Boar flew in the sky, slashing his tail, his hard hairs quivering. His very glance was luminous, and he scattered the clouds in the sky with his hooves and his glittering white tusks. Purport. When the Lord is offered prayers by his devotees, his transcendental activities are described. Here are some of the transcendental features of Lord Boar. As the residents of the upper three planetary systems offered their prayers to the Lord, it is understood that his body expanded throughout the sky, beginning from the topmost planet Brahmaloka or Satyaloka. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita that his eyes are the sun and the moon. Therefore his very glance over the sky was as illuminating as the sun or the moon. The Lord is described herein as Mahidra, which means either a big mountain or the sustainer of the earth. In other words, the Lord's body was as big and hard as the Himalayan mountains. Otherwise, how was it possible that he kept the entire earth on the support of his white tusks? The poet Jayadeva, a great devotee of the Lord, has sung of the incident in his prayers for the incarnations. All glories to Lord Keshava, Krishna, who appeared as the boar. The earth was held between his tusks, which appeared like the scars on the moon. Text 28. He was personally the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and was therefore transcendental, yet because he had the body of a hog, he searched after the earth by smell. His tusks were fearful, and he glanced over the devotee brahmanas engaged in offering prayers. Thus he entered the water. Purport. We should always remember that although the body of a hog is material, the hog form of the Lord was not materially contaminated. It is not possible for an earthly hog to assume a gigantic form spreading throughout the sky. Beginning from the Satyaloka, his body is always transcendental in all circumstances. Therefore the assumption of the form of a boar is only his pastime. His body is all Vedas, or transcendental, but since he had assumed the form of a boar, he began to search out the earth by smelling, just like a hog. The Lord can perfectly play the part of any living entity. The gigantic feature of the boar was certainly very fearful for all non-devotees, but to the pure devotees of the Lord, he was not at all fearful. On the contrary, he was so pleasingly glancing upon his devotees that all of them felt transcendental happiness. Text 29. Diving into the water like a giant mountain, Lord Boar divided the middle of the ocean, and two high waves appeared as the arms of the ocean, which cried loudly as if praying to the Lord, "O Lord of all sacrifices, please do not cut me in two, kindly give me protection." Purport. Even the great ocean was perturbed by the falling of the mountain-like body of the transcendental boar, and it appeared to be frightened, as if death were imminent. Text 30. Lord Boar penetrated the water with his hooves, which were like sharp arrows, and found the limits of the ocean, although it was unlimited. He saw the earth, the resting place for all living beings, lying as it was in the beginning of creation, and he personally lifted it. Purport. The word Rasayam is sometimes interpreted to mean Rasatala, the lowest planetary system, but that is not applicable in this connection, according to Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura. The Earth is 7 times superior to the other planetary systems, namely Tala, Atala, Talatala, Vitala, Rasatala, Patala, etc. Therefore the Earth cannot be situated in the Rasatala planetary system. It is described in the Vishnu Dharma. Patala Muleshvara Bogas Samhatau Vinyasya Padau Prithivim Cha Bibrata Yasya Pamano Na Babuvaso Chuto Mamastyo Mangalya Vivardaye Hari. Therefore the Lord found the earth on the bottom of the Garbhodaka ocean, where the planets rest during the devastation at the end of Brahma's day. Text 31. Lord Boar very easily took the earth on his tusks and got it out of the water. Thus he appeared very splendid. Then, his anger glowing like the Sudarshana wheel, he immediately killed the demon Hiranyaksha, although he tried to fight with the Lord. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Vedic literatures describe the incarnation of Lord Varaha, Boar, in 2 different devastations, namely the Chaksusha devastation and the Svayambhuva devastation. This particular appearance of the Boar incarnation actually took place in the Svayambhuva manifestation, where all planets other than the higher ones, Jana, Mahar, and Satya, merged in the water of devastation. This particular incarnation of the Boar was seen by the inhabitants of the planets mentioned above. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti suggests that the sage Maitreya amalgamated both the Boar incarnations in different devastations and summarized them in his description to Vidura. Text 32. Thereupon Lord Boar killed the demon within the water, just as a lion kills an elephant. The cheeks and tongue of the Lord became smeared with the blood of the demon, just as an elephant becomes reddish from digging in the purple earth. Text 33. Then the Lord, playing like an elephant, suspended the earth on the edge of his curved white tusks. He assumed a bluish complexion like that of a tamala tree, and thus the sages, headed by Brahma, could understand him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and offered respectful obeisances unto the Lord. Text 34. All the sages uttered with great respect, O unconquerable enjoyer of all sacrifices, all glories and all victories unto you. You are the moving in your form of the personified Vedas, and in the hair holes of your body the oceans are submerged. For certain reasons to uplift the earth, you have now assumed the form of a boar. Purport. The Lord can assume any form he likes, and in all circumstances he is the cause of all causes. Since his form is transcendental, he is always the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as he is in the causal ocean in the form of Mahavishnu. Innumerable universes generate from the holes of his bodily hairs, and thus his transcendental body is the Vedas personified. He is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and he is the unconquerable Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is never to be misunderstood to be other than the Supreme Lord, because of his assuming the form of a boar to lift the earth. That is the clear understanding of sages and great personalities like Brahma and other residents of the higher planetary systems. Text 35. O Lord, your form is worshipable by performances of sacrifice, but souls who are simply miscreants are unable to see it. All the Vedic hymns, Gayatri and others, are in the touch of your skin. In your bodily hairs is the kusha grass, in your eyes is the clarified butter, and in your 4 legs are the 4 kinds of fruitive activities. Purport. There is a class of miscreants who are known in the words of Bhagavad Gita as Vedavadi, or so-called strict followers of the Vedas. They do not believe in the incarnation of the Lord. What to speak of the Lord's incarnation as the worshipable hog? They describe worship of the different forms or incarnations of the Lord as anthropomorphism. In the estimation of Srimad Bhagavatam, these men are miscreants, and in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, they are called not only miscreants, but also fools and the lowest of mankind, and it is said that their knowledge has been plundered by illusion due to their atheistic temperament. For such condemned persons, the Lord's incarnation as the gigantic hog is invisible. These strict followers of the Vedas who despise the eternal forms of the Lord may know from Srimad Bhagavatam that such incarnations are personified forms of the Vedas. Lord Boar's skin, his eyes, and his bodily hair holes are all described here as different parts of the Vedas. He is therefore the personified form of the Vedic hymns, and specifically the Gayatri mantra. Text 36. O Lord, your tongue is a plate of sacrifice, your nostril is another plate of sacrifice, in your belly is the eating plate of sacrifice, and another plate of sacrifice is the holes of your ears. In your mouth is the Brahma plate of sacrifice, your throat is the plate of sacrifice known as Soma, and whatever you chew is known as Agnihotra. Purport. The Vedavadis say that there is nothing more than the Vedas and the performances of sacrifice mentioned in the Vedas. They have recently made a rule in their group to formally observe daily sacrifice. They simply ignite a small fire and offer something whimsically, but they do not strictly follow the sacrificial rules and regulations mentioned in the Vedas. It is understood that by regulation there are different plates of sacrifice required, such as Srak, Sruva, Barhis, Chaturhotra, Ida, Chamasa, Prasitra, Graha, and Agnihotra. One cannot achieve the results of sacrifice unless one observes the strict regulations. In this age there is practically no facility for performing sacrifices in strict discipline. Therefore, in this age of Kali, there is a stricture regarding such sacrifices. It is explicitly directed that one should perform Sankirtana Yajna and nothing more. The incarnation of the Supreme Lord is Yajneshvara, and unless one has respect for the incarnation of the Lord, he cannot perfectly perform sacrifice. In other words, taking shelter of the Lord and rendering service unto him is the factual performance of all sacrifices, as explained herein. Different plates of sacrifice correspond to the different parts of the body of the Lord's incarnation. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th Canto, it is explicitly directed that one should perform Sankirtana Yajna to please the Lord's incarnation as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This should be rigidly followed in order to achieve the result of yajna performance. Text 37. Moreover, O Lord, the repetition of your appearance is the desire for all kinds of initiation. Your neck is the place for 3 desires, and your tusks are the result of initiation, and the end of all desires. Your tongue is the prior activities of initiation. Your head is the fire without sacrifice, as well as the fire of worship, and your living forces are the aggregate of all desires. Text 38. O Lord, your semen is the sacrifice called Soma Yajna. Your growth is the ritualistic performances of the morning. Your skin and touch sensations are the 7 elements of the Agnistoma sacrifice. Your bodily joints are symbols of various other sacrifices performed in 12 days. Therefore, you are the object of all sacrifices called Soma and Asoma, and you are bound by yajnas only. Purport. There are 7 kinds of routine yajnas performed by all followers of the Vedic rituals, and they are called Agnistoma, Adyagnistoma, Uktha, Sodashi, Vajapaya, Atiratra, and Aptoryama. Anyone performing such yajnas regularly is supposed to be situated with the Lord, but anyone who is in contact with the Supreme Lord by discharging devotional service is understood to have performed all different varieties of yajnas. Text 39. O Lord, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are worshipable by universal prayers, Vedic hymns, and sacrificial ingredients. We offer our obeisances unto you. You can be realized by the pure mind freed from all visible and invisible material contamination. We offer our respectful obeisances to you as the Supreme Spiritual Master of knowledge in devotional service. Purport. The qualification of bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord, is that the devotee should be free from all material contaminations and desires. This freedom is called vairagya, or denouncement of material desires. One who engages in devotional service to the Lord, according to regulative principles, is automatically freed from material desires, and in that pure state of mind, one can realize the personality of Godhead. The personality of Godhead, being situated in everyone's heart, instructs the devotee regarding pure devotional service so that he may ultimately achieve the association of the Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 10:10 as follows. To one who constantly engages in the devotional service of the Lord with faith and love, the Lord certainly gives the intelligence to achieve him at the ultimate end. One has to conquer the mind, and one may do it by following the Vedic rituals and by performing different types of sacrifice. The ultimate end of all those performances is to attain bhakti, or the devotional service of the Lord. Without bhakti, one cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The original Personality of Godhead, or his innumerable expansions of Vishnu, are the only objects of worship by all the Vedic rituals and sacrificial performances. Text 40. O lifter of the earth with its mountains, which you have lifted with your tusks, is situated as beautifully as a lotus flower, with leaves sustained by an infuriated elephant just coming out of the water. Purport. The fortune of the Earth planet is praised because of its being specifically sustained by the Lord. Its beauty is appreciated and compared to that of a lotus flower situated on the trunk of an elephant. As a lotus flower with leaves is very beautifully situated, with its many beautiful mountains, appeared on the tusks of the wild boar. Text 41. O Lord, as the peaks of great mountains become beautiful when decorated with clouds, your transcendental body has become beautiful because of your lifting the earth on the edge of your tusks. Purport. The word Vibrahma is significant. Vibrahma means illusion as well as beauty. When a cloud rests on the peak of a great mountain, it appears to be sustained by the mountain, and at the same time it looks very beautiful. Similarly, the Lord has no need to sustain the earth on his tusks, but when he does so, the world becomes beautiful, just as the Lord becomes more beautiful because of his pure devotees on the earth. Although the Lord is the transcendental personification of the Vedic hymns, he has become more beautiful because of his appearance to sustain the earth. Text 42. O Lord, for the residential purposes of all inhabitants, both moving and non-moving, this earth is your wife, and you are the Supreme Father. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, along with the Mother Earth, in whom you have invested your own potency, just as an expert sacrificer puts fire in the Arani wood. Purport. The so-called law of gravitation which sustains the planets is described herein as the potency of the Lord. This potency is invested by the Lord in the way that an expert sacrificial Brahmana puts fire in the Arani wood by the potency of Vedic mantras. By this arrangement, the world becomes habitable for both the moving and non-moving creatures. The conditioned souls, who are residents of the material world, are put in the womb of Mother Earth in the same way the seed of a child is put by the father in the womb of the mother. This conception of the Lord and the earth as father and mother is explained in Bhagavad Gita 14.4. Conditioned souls are devoted to the motherland in which they take birth, but they do not know their father. The mother is not independent in producing children. Similarly, material nature cannot produce living creatures unless in contact with the Supreme Father, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us to offer obeisances unto the Mother along with the Father, the Supreme Lord, because it is the Father only who impregnates the Mother with all energies for the sustenance and maintenance of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. Text 43. Who else but you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, could deliver the earth from within the water? It is not very wonderful for you, however, because you acted most wonderfully in the creation of the universe. By your energy you have created this wonderful cosmic manifestation. Purport. When a scientist discovers something impressive to the ignorant mass of people, the common man, without inquiry, accepts such a discovery as wonderful. But the intelligent man is not struck with wonder by such discoveries. He gives all credit to the person who created the wonderful brain of the scientist. A common man is also struck with wonder by the wonderful action of material nature, and he gives all credit to the cosmic manifestation. The learned Krishna-conscious person, however, knows well that behind the cosmic manifestation is the brain of Krishna, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.10. Mayadhyakshana prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Since Krishna can direct the wonderful cosmic manifestation, it is not at all wonderful for him to assume the gigantic form of a boar, and thus deliver the earth from the mire of the water. A devotee is therefore not astonished to see the wonderful boar, because he knows that the Lord is able to act far more wonderfully by his potencies, which are inconceivable to the brain of even the most erudite scientist. Text 44. O Supreme Lord, undoubtedly we are inhabitants of the most pious planets, the Jana, Tapas, and Satya Lokas, but still we have been purified by the drops of water sprinkling from your shoulder hairs, by the shaking of your body. Purport. Ordinarily, the body of a hog is considered impure, but one should not consider that the hog incarnation assumed by the Lord is also impure. That form of the Lord is the personified Vedas and is transcendental. The inhabitants of the Jana, Tapas, and Satya Lokas are the most pious persons in the material world, but because those planets are situated in the material world, there are so many material impurities there also. Therefore, when the drops of water from the tips of the Lord's shoulder hairs were sprinkled upon the bodies of the inhabitants of the higher planets, they felt purified. The Ganges water is pure because of its emanating from the toe of the Lord, and there is no difference between the water emanating from the toe and that from the tips of the hair on the shoulder of Lord Boar. They are both absolute and transcendental. Text 45. O Lord, there is no limit to your wonderful activities. Anyone who desires to know the limit of your activities is certainly nonsensical. Everyone in this world is conditioned by the powerful mystic potencies. Please bestow your causeless mercy upon these conditioned souls. Purport. Mental speculators who want to understand the limit of the unlimited are consciously nonsensical. Every one of them is captivated by the external potencies of the Lord. The best thing for them is to surrender unto Him, knowing Him to be inconceivable, for thus they can receive His causeless mercy. This prayer was offered by the inhabitants of the higher planetary systems, namely the Jana, Tapas, and Satya Lokas, who are far more intelligent and powerful than humans. Vishvam Samastam is very significant here. There are the material world and the spiritual world. The sages pray, both worlds are bewildered by your different energies. Those who are in the spiritual world are absorbed in your loving service, forgetting themselves, and you also, and those in the material world, are absorbed in material sense gratification, and therefore also forget you. No one can know you because you are unlimited. It is best not to try to know you by unnecessary mental speculation. Rather, kindly bless us so that we can worship you with causeless devotional service. Text 46. The sage Maitreya said, "The Lord, being thus worshipped by all the great sages and transcendentalists, touched the earth with his hooves and placed it on the water." Purport: The earth was placed on the water by his inconceivable potency. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he can sustain the huge planets either on the water or in the air as he likes. The tiny human brain cannot conceive how these potencies of the Lord can act. Man can give some vague explanation of the laws by which such phenomena are made possible, but actually the tiny human brain is unable to conceive of the activities of the Lord, which are therefore called inconceivable. Yet the frog philosophers still try to give some imaginary explanation. Text 47. In this manner, the personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, the maintainer of all living entities, raised the earth from within the water, and having placed it afloat on the water, he returned to his own abode. Purport: The personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, descends by his will to the material planets in his innumerable incarnations for particular purposes, and again he goes back to his own abode. When he descends, he is called an avatara, because avatara means one who descends. Neither the Lord himself nor his specific devotees who come to this earth are ordinary living entities like us. Text 48. If one hears and describes in a devotional service attitude this auspicious narration of Lord Bor, which is worthy of description, the Lord, who is within the heart of everyone, is very pleased. Purport: In his various incarnations, the Lord appears, acts, and leaves behind him a narrative history which is as transcendental as he himself. Every one of us is fond of hearing some wonderful narration, but most stories are neither auspicious nor worth hearing, because they are of the inferior quality of material nature. Every living entity is of superior quality, spirit soul, and nothing material can be auspicious for him. Intelligent persons should therefore hear personally and cause others to hear the descriptive narrations of the Lord's activities, for that will destroy the pangs of material existence. Out of this causeless mercy only, the Lord comes to this earth and leaves behind his merciful activities, so that the devotees may derive transcendental benefit. Text 49. Nothing remains unachieved when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with someone. By transcendental achievement, one understands everything else to be insignificant. One who engages in transcendental loving service is elevated to the highest perfectional stage by the Lord himself, who is seated in everyone's heart. Purport: As stated in Bhagavad Gita 10.10, the Lord gives intelligence to the pure devotees so that they may be elevated to the highest perfectional stage. It is confirmed herein that a pure devotee who constantly engages in the loving service of the Lord is awarded all knowledge necessary to reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For such a devotee there is nothing valuable to be achieved but the Lord's service. If one serves faithfully, there is no possibility of frustration, because the Lord himself takes charge of the devotee's advancement. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart, and he knows the devotee's motive and arranges everything achievable. In other words, the pseudo-devotee, who is anxious to achieve material gains, cannot attain the highest perfectional stage, because the Lord is in knowledge of his motive. One merely has to become sincere in his purpose, and then the Lord is there to help in every way. Text 50. Who, other than one who is not a human being, can exist in this world and not be interested in the ultimate goal of life? Who can refuse the nectar of narrations about the personality of Godhead's activities, which by itself can deliver one from all material pangs? Purport: The narration of the activities of the personality of Godhead is like a constant flow of nectar. No one can refuse to drink such nectar except one who is not a human being. Devotional service to the Lord is the highest goal of life for every human being, and such devotional service begins by hearing about the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. Only an animal, or a man who is almost an animal in behavior, can refuse to take an interest in hearing the transcendental message of the Lord. There are many books of stories and histories in the world, but except for the histories or narrations on the topics of the personality of Godhead, none are capable of diminishing the burden of material pangs. Therefore, one who is serious about eliminating material existence must chant and hear of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. Otherwise, one must be compared to the non-humans. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 3rd Canto, 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Appearance of Lord Varaha. Chapter 14. Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya about the Lord's incarnation as Varaha, Vidura, who had taken a vow, begged him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities of the Lord, since he, Vidura, did not yet feel satisfied. Text 2. Sri Vidura said, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices the personality of Godhead, Lord bore. Purport. As referred to previously, the boar incarnation was manifested in 2 millenniums, namely Svayambhuva and Chakshusha. In both millenniums there was a boar incarnation of the Lord, but in the Svayambhuva millennium he lifted the earth from within the water of the universe, whereas in the Chakshusha millennium he killed the first demon, Hiranyaksha. In the Svayambhuva millennium he assumed the color white, and in the Chakshusha millennium he assumed the color red. Vidura had already heard about one of them, and he proposed to hear about the other. The 2 different boar incarnations described are the one Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 3. What was the reason, O Brahmana, for the fight between the demon king and Lord Boar, while the Lord was lifting the earth as his pastime? Text 4. My mind has become very inquisitive, and therefore I am not satisfied with hearing the narration of the Lord's appearance. Please therefore speak more and more to a devotee who is faithful. Purport. One who is actually faithful and inquisitive is qualified to hear the transcendental pastimes of the appearance and disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vidura was a suitable candidate to receive such transcendental messages. Text 5. The great sage Maitreya said, O warrior, the inquiry made by you is just befitting a devotee, because it concerns the incarnation of the personality of Godhead. He is the source of liberation from the chain of birth and death for all those who are otherwise destined to die. Purport. The great sage Maitreya addressed Vidura as a warrior not only because Vidura belonged to the Kuru family, but because he was anxious to hear about the chivalrous activities of the Lord in his incarnations of Varaha and Narasimha. Because the inquiries concerned the Lord, they were perfectly befitting a devotee. A devotee has no taste for hearing anything mundane. There are many topics of mundane warfare, but a devotee is not inclined to hear them. The topics of the warfare in which the Lord engages do not concern the war of death, but the war against the chain of Maya, which obliges one to accept repeated birth and death. In other words, one who takes delight in hearing the war topics of the Lord is relieved from the chains of birth and death. Foolish people are suspicious of Krishna's taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, but knowing that his taking part ensured liberation for all who were present on the battlefield, it is said by Bhismadeva that all who were present on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original spiritual existences after death. Therefore, hearing the war topics of the Lord is as good as any other devotional service. Text 6. By hearing these topics from the sage Narada, the son of King Uttanapada, Dhruva was enlightened regarding the personality of Godhead, and he ascended to the abode of the Lord, placing his feet over the head of death. Purport. While quitting his body, Maharaja Dhruva, the son of King Uttanapada, was attended by personalities like Sananda and others who received him in the kingdom of God. He left this world at an early age, as a young boy, although he had attained the throne of his father and had several children of his own. Because he was due to quit this world, death was waiting for him. He did not care for death, however, and even with his present body, he boarded a spiritual airplane and went directly to the planet of Vishnu because of his association with the great sage Narada, who had spoken to him the narration of the pastimes of the Lord. Text 7. This history of the fight between the Lord as a boar and the demon Hiranyaksha was heard by me in a year long ago, as it was described by the foremost of the demigods, Brahma, when he was questioned by the other demigods. Text 8. Diti, daughter of Daksha, being afflicted with sex desire, begged her husband, Kasyapa, the son of Marichi, to give intercourse with her in the evening in order to beget a child. Text 9. The sun was setting, and the sage was sitting in trance after offering oblations to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, whose tongue is the sacrificial fire. Purport. Fire is considered to be the tongue of the personality of Godhead Vishnu, and oblations of grains and clarified butter offered to the fire are thus accepted by him. That is the principle of all sacrifices, of which Lord Vishnu is the master. In other words, the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu includes the satisfaction of all demigods and other living beings. Text 10. In that place the beautiful Diti expressed her desire, O learned one, Cupid is taking his arrows and distressing me forcibly, as a mad elephant troubles a banana tree. Purport. Beautiful Diti, seeing her husband absorbed in trance, began to speak loudly, not attempting to attract him by bodily expressions. She frankly said that her whole body was distressed by sex desire because of her husband's presence, just as a banana tree is troubled by a mad elephant. It was not natural for her to agitate her husband when he was in trance, but she could not control her strong sexual appetite. Her sex desire was like a mad elephant, and therefore it was the prime duty of her husband to give her all protection by fulfilling her desire. Text 11. Therefore you should be kind towards me by showing me complete mercy. I desire to have sons, and I am much distressed by seeing the opulence of my co-wives. By performing this act, you will become happy. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, sexual intercourse for begetting children is accepted as righteous. A person sexually inclined for simple sex gratification, however, is unrighteous. In Diti's appeal to her husband for sex, it was not exactly that she was afflicted by sex desires, but she desired sons. Since she had no sons, she felt poorer than her co-wives. Therefore, Kasyapa was supposed to satisfy his bona fide wife. Text 12. A woman is honored in the world by the benediction of her husband, and a husband like you will become famous by having children, because you are meant for the expansion of living entities. Purport. According to Risabhadeva, one should not become a father or mother unless one is confident that he can beget children whom he can deliver from the clutches of birth and death. Human life is the only opportunity to get out of the material scene, which is full of the miseries of birth, death, old age, and diseases. Every human being should be given the opportunity to take advantage of his human form of life, and a father like Kasyapa is supposed to beget good children for the purpose of liberation. Text 13. In days long ago, our father, the most opulent Daksha, who was affectionate to his daughters, asked each of us separately whom we would prefer to select as our husband. Purport. It appears from this verse that free selection of a husband was allowed by the father, but not by free association. The daughters were asked separately to submit their selection of a husband who was famous for his acts and personality. The ultimate selection depended on the choice of the father. Text 14. Our well-wishing father Daksha, after knowing our intentions, handed over 13 of his daughters unto you, and since then we have all been faithful. Purport. Generally, the daughters were too shy to express their opinions before their father, but the father would accept the daughters' intentions through someone else, such as a grandmother, to whom the grandchildren had free access. King Daksha collected the opinions of his daughters, and thus handed over 13 to Kasyapa. Every one of Diti's sisters was a mother of children. Therefore, since she was equally faithful to the same husband, why should she remain without children? Text 15. O lotus-eyed one, kindly bless me by fulfilling my desire. When someone in distress approaches a great person, his pleas should never go in vain. Purport. Diti knew well that her request might be rejected because of the untimely situation, but she pleaded that when there is an emergency or a distressful condition, there is no consideration of time or situation. Text 16. O hero, Vidura, Diti, being thus afflicted by the contamination of lust, and therefore poor and talkative, was pacified by the son of Marichi in suitable words. Purport. When a man or woman is afflicted by the lust of sex desire, it is to be understood as sinful contamination. Kasyapa was engaged in his spiritual activities, but he did not have sufficient strength to refuse his wife, who was thus afflicted. He could have refused her with strong words, expressing impossibility, but he was not as spiritually strong as Vidura. Vidura is addressed here as a hero because no one is stronger in self-control than a devotee of the Lord. It appears that Kasyapa was already inclined to have sexual enjoyment with his wife, and because he was not a strong man, he tried to dissuade her only with pacifying words. Text 17. O afflicted one, I shall forthwith gratify whatever desire is dear to you, for who else but you is the source of the three perfections of liberation? Purport: the three perfections of liberation are religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. For a conditioned soul, the wife is considered to be the source of liberation because she offers her service to the husband for his ultimate liberation. Conditional material existence is based on sense gratification, and if someone has the good fortune to get a good wife, he is helped by the wife in all respects. If one is disturbed in his conditional life, he becomes more and more entangled in material contamination. A faithful wife is supposed to cooperate with her husband in fulfilling all material desires so that he can then become comfortable and execute spiritual activities for the perfection of life. If, however, the husband is progressive in spiritual advancement, the wife undoubtedly shares in his activities, and thus both the wife and the husband profit in spiritual perfection. It is essential, therefore, that girls as well as boys be trained to discharge spiritual duties so that at the time of cooperation both will be benefited. The training of the boy is brahmacharya, and the training of the girl is chastity. A faithful wife and spiritually trained brahmachari are a good combination for advancement of the human mission. Text 18. As one can cross over the ocean with sea-going vessels, one can cross the dangerous situation of the material ocean by living with a wife. Purport: there are 4 social orders for cooperation in the endeavor for liberation from material existence. The orders of brahmacharya, or pious student life, household life with a wife, retired life, and renounced life all depend for successful advancement on the householder who lives with a wife. This cooperation is essential for the proper functioning of the institution of the 4 social orders and the 4 spiritual orders of life. This Vedic Varnashrama system is generally known as the caste system. The man who lives with a wife has a great responsibility in maintaining the members of the other social orders, the brahmacharis, vanaprashthas, and sannyasis. Except for the grihasthas, or the householders, everyone is supposed to engage in the spiritual advancement of life, and therefore the brahmachari, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi have very little time to earn a livelihood. They therefore collect alms from the grihasthas, and thus they secure the bare necessities of life and cultivate spiritual understanding. By helping the other 3 sections of society cultivate spiritual values, the householder also makes advancement in spiritual life. Ultimately, every member of society automatically becomes spiritually advanced and easily crosses the ocean of nescience.